What is clean architecture? When we integrate all the key characteristics of all popular architectural patterns into an actionable idea, that can be called the clean architecture. And who assembled and integrated these characteristics of popular architectural patterns, like the hexagonal architecture of Alistair Cockburn, the DCI pattern, data context and integration of Trege Rinskog and James Coplin, and BCE, the boundary control entity pattern of Ivor Jacobson, into an actionable idea. It is Robert C. Martin, who is also known as the Uncle Bob in the development community. So, according to Uncle Bob, all these architectures have a common objective, and that is the separation of concerns. They all achieve the separation of concerns by dividing the software into layers. Each has at least one layer for business rules and another layer for user and system interfaces. And this idea produces systems that have following characteristics. Those systems are generally independent of frameworks. That is, the architecture of the system does not depend on the existence of some library of feature laden software. This allows you to use such frameworks as tools rather than considering them as a constraint. Those systems are independent of the user interface as well. The UI can change easily without affecting the rest of the system, such as a web UI can be replaced with a console UI without changing the business rules. That should be the level of flexibility and separation of concerns in your architecture. Those systems are independent of the database. You can swap out Oracle or SQL Server for Mongo or something else. Your business rules are not bound to your database. And those systems must be independent of any external agency too. That means your business rules don't know anything at all about the interface to the outside world. And finally, the systems must be testable. When we say testable, we mean the business rules can be tested without the UI, database, web server, or any other external element. So, this is the diagram of such an architecture provided by Robert C. Martin in his book, which he called the actionable idea of these characteristics. As we can see, the layers of clean architecture are typically organized into the following four layers. The entities are at the core. This layer contains the business logic and rules of the application. It represents the core and it should not depend on any other layer. Then we have the use cases. This layer contains the application specific logic that orchestrates the interaction between the entities and the infrastructure. It defines the action that can be performed on the entities and it should not depend on the infrastructure. Then we have the interface adapters. This layer contains the code that adapts the data from the infrastructure to the use cases and vice versa. It contains the code for UI, external systems, and databases, and it should not contain the business logic. And then we have the infrastructure layer. This layer contains the code that interacts with the external systems, such as databases, file systems, web services, or any other external interface. It should not contain any business logic. It should be easy to replace it with a different implementation. So we can say that at the heart of clean architecture, it is the idea of dividing the software system into the layers, with each layer being responsible for a specified aspect of the system. The layers are organized in a hierarchical fashion, with the innermost layer containing the most important and domain specific logic, and the outer layers providing infrastructure services like databases, UI, and network communication. This is what the whole idea of clean architecture, coined by Robert C. Martin, is. And to elaborate this, he also talked about the dependency rule. As he mentioned in his book, the concentric circles in this diagram represent different areas of software. In general, the further in you go, the higher level the software becomes. The outer circles are mechanisms, the inner circles are policies. And the overriding rule that makes this architecture work is the dependency rule. That is, the source code dependencies must point only inward toward the higher level policies. Nothing in inner circle can know anything at all about something in outer circle. So we can say that the clean architecture emphasizes on the separation of concerns in a software system and facilitates in building the systems that are scalable, maintainable, and testable.